Looks like it is.
Okay, awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, you're in for a treat. Before we get to that, I got to give you a little background of who I am so you don't think I'm crazy. My name is Perry Gruber. I started my career in the Marine Corps. I spent 9 years as a journalist, as a combat correspondent in the Marines. After that, I took a job at the Bonneville Power Administration here in Oregon and ran their media relations department for 9 years, representing the energy industry for the Department of Energy. After that, I was recruited out of the Bonneville Power Administration to work for Intel to start up their community relations department. I ran that organization for about 5 years before starting a entrepreneurial organization called Community Solutions within Intel, which we expanded into a global operation before I started doing startups. So I left Intel in 2008 and started doing startups. I've started up 3 different companies, and I'm working on my 4th right now besides this one that we're going to talk about today. So that's my background. I want to give special thanks to Stan and Jesse and Aaron and Kate for having me out here. I think what Aaron and Kate are doing is fantastic. And if you have some spare cash, please donate into the can because they really need to keep doing what they're doing. It's really important. As you saw the first presentation that we had today, we're in a hurt locker in the world, especially in the United States. But my presentation is going to be totally positive. You're going to love it. But I do need to characterize, because some of the folks that are here don't know what TZM is and what ZDay is. And the Zietgeist Movement is an important organization because they are promoting a conversation that needs to occur in the world about how to get humanity off of debt and money and government. Those 3 things are oppressing humanity. And it feels like it's not. It feels like that's not happening because you're able to use money to get things that you want, including other human beings in terms of human relationships and stuff like that. But in reality, when you look at it, those 3 things are extremely oppressive to humanity. And what I'm going to share with you is a way to get out of that. But I want to just touch on the Zietgeist Movement because for a very long time now, they have painted or characterized the vision for what humanity could actually be on this planet if we're able to get off of those 3 things, debt, money, and government. And the challenge that I have with the Zietgeist Movement's approach is they have not yet characterized how to get from here to there. But I don't think that's a problem for the Zietgeist Movement because what I believe their mission is advocacy. It's getting people like you to think about this new vision so that someone in the world, maybe me, can come up with a way to get us from here to there. So what I'm going to propose to you today is a way to get us from what we have today to what the Zietgeist Movement proposes with this resource-based economy. So let's get started. Okay, there it goes. All right, so everyone knows what that is, right? Okay, I love Star Trek. One of the things I love about Star Trek is it like the Zietgeist Movement, it paints a vision. It paints a vision of what humanity can be like. Now, that's fiction, but it's an amazing piece of fiction. How many have not seen Star Trek? That's what I thought. So you know what this thing can do. It's freaking amazing. But what goes on inside that thing is equally amazing. And what goes on in the society that produced that thing it just boggles the mind. So you have people who are, look at those people. Now, of course, those are actors. But we're talking about the story, right? So those people are super healthy. You don't see any diabetics on the Enterprise. You don't see any obese people. You don't see racists attacking the minorities. You don't see it. Well, there are a couple episodes of that. But the idea, the reason why the story did that was to get us to think about what's happening in the present, right? But on the Enterprise, you didn't have that unless those people invaded the Enterprise and then they took care of it. But anyway, my point is that the people in the Star Trek universe are super healthy. You never see them having to pay for transportation. You don't see them whipping out a credit card to feed the meter. You don't see them having to whip out cash to get the food they need to eat. They just go to that box and say, "Real great, hot." And out comes the thing that they want, right? You don't see them having to pay for their clothing. You don't see them having to whip out a health insurance plan in order to get the health care they need. You don't see any of that. When I was a kid watching Star Trek, I thought, this can be our reality. How did we get into the reality that we have today? Why are we not in that reality? So like the guy who was on the television screen before we started talking was talking about this possibility. this possibility where there's total abundance. There is total abundance. What constrains that abundance are those three things: debt, money, and government. Now, I would encourage you, you don't have to do this, but I would encourage you to buy a book called Debt, The First 5,000 Years by David Graeber. Has anyone read that book? Okay. That book will describe to you why and how, well, why debt, money, and government is bad, and how those three things work together to create the environment we have today, which is 100% oppressive. Okay, back to good stuff. When you look at when you watch Star Trek, everyone on Star Trek is super passionate about what they're doing, right? We can't take it anymore, Scotty. We've got to get the dilithium crystals. Let's go out and colonize that planet, or whatever it is that they're doing in whatever episode. There's no one up there in depression. There's no one having problems with bipolar. There's no one on the Enterprise who's ADD. All these people are passionate about what they're doing, whether they're in the engine room, whether they're in the medical bay, whether they're running the transporter, whether they're on the bridge. It doesn't matter. And the people who are in the engine room, they're not jealous about the people on the bridge. And the people who are in the cafeteria, they're not jealous about the away team that are getting on the ships and going on the planet. Everybody is doing what they're passionate about. No jealousy. It's amazing. Why can't we have what they have? And then when you look at their cities, all of the cities are super clean. You don't see a homeless person at the end of the freeway. You don't even see freeways. You don't see people running around begging for change. You don't see people fighting in the streets. You don't see any pollution. The airs are clear. The air is clear. I don't think I've ever seen a Star Trek episode where you've seen an airline in the sky. They've got some kind of alternate transportation that allows them to move from here to there without putting any pollution out, pretty much. How did they do it? Now, of course, it's a story. That's how they did it. But the vision that they paint, how can we get from here to there? Can we get from here to there? I think we can get from here to there. And my team has designed a solution to do it. So, how do you do it? Let's take a look at it. First, we have to come up with some basic assumptions. Now remember, this is in the context of the Star Trek universe. So some of this stuff is going to sound kind of crazy, but I believe it's 100% possible. So the basic assumptions are this. First, we have an open market. We don't have a free market because a free market is a lie. The free market is not free. We have an open market, and an open market means anyone can participate at any time and avail themselves of whatever they need when they need it. That open market is unrestricted, and it is free of any market externalities. Does everyone know what a market externality is? It's like pollution, corruption, crime, okay, those type of things. Inflation, deflation, all that stuff. So our open market doesn't have any of that. This is an assumption. The open market also should promote the good behaviors of humanity. So if you look around the world and you read the newspapers, you read about something that someone's done and it's pretty super cool. Your heart flutters a little bit, or you get a little butterflies in your stomach and you go, oh, right? Those are the kind of behaviors that you want your open market to promote. The kind of things where people help other people, where people produce something for other people because they're passionate about that thing and they want to share it. Where the thing that they're sharing, when other people consume that thing, they're like super excited because this thing's freaking cool that this person's shared. Like that 3D printer in the back. So you want a market that's going to inspire the best of humanity, including acts of bravery. So like when you have a fireman that runs into a burning building, or a husband that climbs a tree to get the cat out of the tree, or someone who saves someone from getting beat up, or someone who speaks up for a gay person who's getting bashed, whether verbally or physically. You know, those types of behaviors are the types of behaviors that you want the open market to promote. You don't want the market to prevent those types of behaviors, which I believe to be natural human behaviors. So, the free market does not do what I just said, but we want, in this assumption, the open market to do that. You also want the open market to prevent those human behaviors that we don't want to see. Can anyone name a human behavior that we would prefer not to see that we see today?
Murder.
War, murder, what else? Greed, yep. Selfishness. Backstabbing. Lying about other people. All these kinds of behaviors. Stealing private information and selling that to someone else in order to embarrass that other person. Those type of things. Those are the kind of behaviors which are natural human behaviors in the context of debt, money, and government. They're natural human behaviors in the context of debt, money, and government. we don't want our open market to inspire those types of human behaviors. We want it actually to squelch them, to weed them out of humanity. That's what we want the market to do. And then the last thing we want to do is we want to eliminate the idea of cost. So the number one thing that keeps us from doing the things that we all know we need to do, but we don't do, is because it costs too much. The first thing that comes out of people's mouths, how much is it going to cost? Or, it costs too much. We can't build a spaceship to go somewhere else and colonize the planet because it costs too much. We can't clean up the Pacific Northwest, or the Pacific Gyre, that big trash heap out in the middle of the Pacific that's spinning in a circle. We can't clean that up because it costs too much. We can't get off of the fossil fuel industry and onto something else that produces BTUs we need because gas is so cheap, which means it costs too much to do that other thing. We can't provide insurance to everybody because it costs too much. We want a market, in our assumptions, that enables us to get rid of that cost barrier. If we get rid of that, all of a sudden, all kinds of things become possible. Oops, I went backwards. Okay, our next assumption is this thing called basic human sovereignty, or human rights. So we want the open market to promote the idea that every human being is an individual human being who has certain rights and abilities and certain protections. No matter what they believe, no matter what they look like, no matter how they feel, they have total freedom to do whatever they want as long as whatever they're doing doesn't negatively impact another person. So that's what we define as human sovereignty. Now, the United Nations has a declaration of human rights that covers a lot of what I'm talking about here. So this isn't anything that I made up. You're free to go to the United Nations website and check it out. But basically, it says a lot of what I just said. Unfortunately, we don't follow that, as you know, here in the United States and elsewhere. The other thing about the basic human rights, according to our assumptions, has to be this. So every human being on the planet needs these 5 things in order to thrive. Not just survive, but to thrive. We need food, we need clothing, we need healthcare, we need education, and we need housing. Without any of these 5 things, you're suffering. So, according to my theory of basic human rights, everybody needs to have these without having to work for them, without having to pay for them. They should cost nothing to individuals, all individuals. So, the question I often get when I say something like what I just said is, how the heck are you going to do that? So let's take a look at how to do that. Let's reverse engineer a solution that'll get us from what we have today to that Star Trek universe that I was talking about a minute ago. Well, the first thing that people often ask is, how do you motivate people? The people on the right will say, if you don't make things scarce, requiring people to work for them, people aren't going to work. They're just going to sit around and get lazy. They're going to, how do they say it? They're going to subsist off the public dole, is what they say. But I know for a fact that all kinds of people work and they're not paid anything to do that work. For example, mothers raise children. They're not getting paid for that work. Mothers wash clothes. That's work. Work is defined as effort put forth in order to achieve something. So it doesn't necessarily, work does not only mean going to a cubicle and working for a corporation, putting out effort in order to produce product that an organization can therefore sell to other people. Work is human effort expended to produce a given result. And a lot of women I know are working and they're not getting paid for any of the work they're doing. And men do the same thing. So, when a person says that poor people don't work, that's not true. Human beings work all the time, and they will work without being paid because they're doing it right now. So, how do you motivate people to do things so that other people can achieve what I was talking about on the previous slide about those 5 basic needs? How do you provide those things and get people to provide them? Because you're going to need people to provide them until technology gets to the point where you don't need people to do that. Well, you have to reward them. Today we pay them. But in our assumption, in this reverse engineering experiment, we're going to reward people. We're not going to pay them. We're going to reward them. So let's take a look at how that works. The first thing we have to do is we have to design a way to reward people a way that motivates people to do things without paying them. So, by the way, my organization is called Copiosis, in case you haven't noticed. So we have this idea called the Copiosis reward, which I'll describe a little bit in more detail later. But first we have to kind of back into it. Remember, we're reverse engineering this idea. So in order to reward people, we have to tie the reward to something that is inaccessible to them in order to motivate them to want to get the reward. Does that make sense? Everyone following me so far? Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to take all products and services in the open market and we're going to classify them. Every product and service that aligns with those 5 basic needs that I described earlier, food, clothing, shelter, education, and healthcare, we're going to call those necessities. Every other product that does not fit into that category, we're going to call a luxury. Then we have this third category we call capital goods. Let's not talk about those right now, but just to define them, it's anything that doesn't fit into the previous 2 categories. We'll talk about that. I don't think we're going to talk about that today, but if you have questions, they're not important relative to this reverse engineering approach we're taking. So you have necessities and you have luxuries. Necessities are going to be provided to everyone at no cost to them. But the luxuries, we're going to use those to create this reward system. So we're going to take the reward system and we're going to apply a function to them. And the function is going to be like this. We're going to say that in order for you to consume the luxury goods and services, you're going to have to earn these rewards. So the reward unlocks access to the luxuries in this open market. We're also going to say that the reward can only be awarded to human beings. So an organization cannot obtain rewards. Nonprofit organizations cannot obtain rewards. The military cannot obtain reward. Okay, so in essence, what we've done is we've eliminated money at this point. So there's no money in our open market. It all thrives off this thing we're calling reward. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to say, once someone receives that reward cannot be taken from them for any reason unless the individual who owns that reward says, yes, you can take it from me. So there's no taxes, there's no fines, there's no fees, there's no interest payments, there's nothing like that can happen. First of all, because there's no money. But if you try to attach those things to reward, we're not going to allow that. We're also going to say that these rewards can't be transferred. So if you have a batch of rewards here, you can't give them to someone else. They're yours to keep. But once you use them, they're gone. As long as you hold on to them, they're there. But once you use them, they disappear. And then the last thing we're going to say is these rewards are intangible. They don't exist in reality. They're just a concept, a number, let's say. So there's no physical representation of the reward. The rewards can't be given from one person to another. They can be used only to access the luxuries because necessities are provided at no cost to you. And they can only be owned by human beings. So if you think about that, we've eliminated a lot of the problems we currently experience because a lot of the problems that we currently experience are the result of either individuals or organizations using money to achieve something that produces a negative outcome. Okay, now this may sound kind of, I can't get my head around this description that you're saying, Perry. So I want to tie it to something that you're probably familiar with. If you remember, maybe 15 years ago, there was this thing called the frequent flyer model. We have frequent flyer mile programs today, but they've changed a lot. But 15 years ago, frequent flyer mile programs operated exactly the way that I just described this type of reward system. So when you flew a certain amount of miles, you earned this reward. You couldn't transfer the reward to anyone else. They're yours to keep. No one could take them from you, although initially the reward programs had this expiration date for them. But generally, no one could take them from you. You couldn't give them to anyone, and they can only be used for one thing. Until a little bit later, they started adding these other things that you could buy with your frequent flyer miles. Remember this? Okay. So everyone is familiar with the frequent flyer mile program. Well, we're basically saying the same thing here. We're going to create this reward program that's going to replace money, that's going to allow you to have access to the luxuries. You don't need the rewards to get your necessities because they're provided to you at no cost. Okay, so the next question I get usually at this point is, well, who's going to administer this reward program? And this is where people tend to think that the innovation we've created at Copiosis is a government, when in reality it is not a government at all. There's no government in a Copiosis society. But we do have this thing called the payer organization. So the payer organization is the organization that administers the reward program. They don't decide who gets rewards or how much. That's accomplished by an algorithm I'm going to talk about in a minute. But what they do provide is a human interface for members of the society to interact with their rewards. They work with a lot of numbers, a lot of data. So basically what they're doing is they're going out into the society and they're bringing in all the inputs that are necessary to drive the algorithm. So you may have scientists out there who are measuring the pollution contribution of automobiles and bringing that information back to the organization. You may have people out there in the farming community measuring what farmers are doing in terms of product yields and the ROI based on certain types of technologies that they're using and bringing that data back to the payer organization. All this data is being amassed and put into the algorithms that we're designing that determine what reward individuals are going to get for whatever actions that they're producing in this new society. Now bear with me because we're reverse engineering, so we're kind of going backwards through this solution. It'll make sense at the end, I promise. This organization also, these individuals who are all volunteers, and anyone can volunteer to be part of the payer organization, they also act as a human interface for people in the society. So if you have a question about your reward points or what have you, you can go to a human being and talk to that person. How many people saw Elysium? Anyone see Elysium? Okay, remember that scene in Elysium where Matt Damon has to go and talk to the counselor, and instead of there being a human being, there's that dummy that's speaking with him? Okay, there's none of that in this system. You actually have a human being to talk to as opposed to an automaton. So people ask, well, where are these people going to come from that are going to populate this payer organization? Well, if you think about the government and all of the agencies it represents, there are literally millions of people that automatically become available whose skills and abilities and education and training lend themselves to participating as volunteers in the payer organization. Now, of course, the payer organization, the individuals who volunteer for the payer organization also receive reward just like everyone else. So they are, in a sense, paid, even though in this system there is no pay because there is no money. So the individuals who would populate the payer organization are the same people who today are out there in the field collecting all kinds of data for whatever purpose. So there are statisticians, there are scientists, there are researchers, there are data analyzers, there are analysts, there are people who produce pretty charts with numbers. All these types of people that do the work they do today to support society and the government would do the same things, but in support of the payer organization. So, we're backing into the solution. We have some ideas here. We have an open market. We have this concept called human sovereignty, with which comes the 5 basic necessities that all human beings need, provided to them at no cost. We also have this reward system that enables people to be compensated, so to speak, or rewarded or awarded for producing the necessities that people would consume, as well as the luxuries. And then we have this payer organization who's going to basically run society without any societal controls, actually. So the payer organization does not control the society. It simply provides data to the society for the individuals to make their decisions. So how do you tie this thing together? How do you actually make it work? Because I've been talking about these different elements, but I haven't described how they work together. So it's kind of like in your head going, I'm not really getting how this thing works. We're about to get to that. So the thing that ties them together is an algorithm that we've created called the net benefit reward. So net benefit reward algorithm, does everyone know what an algorithm is? Okay, so the net benefit algorithm basically goes like this. When you take action in the world, you produce a certain result. Some of the results you produce are positive, and some of the results that you produce are negative. Would everyone agree with that? Every action you take produces a positive result and a not positive result. The net benefit algorithm works like this. You take all the positive results from a human being's action and subtract from that all the negative results. And the net result that you get is what people are rewarded for. Now, if you think about that, That's an extremely complicated calculation. It's extremely complicated, mostly because it involves what? Value judgment, right? Whose measuring stick are you going to use to determine whether something's good or bad, or positive or negative? And this is why the algorithm is so important. But if you can crack that nut, if you can create an algorithm that actually does that, do you need a governing organization? Or can that algorithm, I use this word lightly, compensate people for the actions that they take, such that actions that produce maximum positive results earn maximum reward, and actions that produce maximum negative results earn nothing. If that, and when those rewards are earned, it opens the door to products and services that aren't available to you if you don't produce that result. What would that do for society? Assuming that you could crack the value question. That's what my organization is working on. When the planet and people are better off, you receive a reward. If you take action that doesn't do that, you don't get a reward. So you're totally free to do whatever you want in this society. You can do whatever you want. But if you want to earn a reward, you've got to do this. You've got to make the planet and people better off. Okay? So the net benefit reward automatically categorizes individuals into three groups, basically. You have producers, people who produce things for other people. It's very self-explanatory. You have consumers, people who consume the actions of the producers. And then you have the payer organization. I'll give you a second to consume that slide. Okay, time's up. So in the Zietgeist Movement, they have this thing called the resource-based economy. And the resource-based economy is essentially it's a non-scarcity, free society where all goods and services are provided to individuals based on some sort of distribution mechanism. The distribution mechanism is not defined, as far as I know, in the Zietgeist Movement. What my organization is doing is trying to define that. So the way that things get done in a resource-based economy from my organization standpoint is this way. So the resources are distributed according to the net benefit that those resources can produce. Those resources have to interact with the human being, because human beings are the ones that produce the actions. So, for example, if I have a certain amount of ore that I own over here, I can choose freely to do whatever I want with it. But in this environment where my actions are somewhat, governed not the right word, but are determined by the amount of net benefit I produce, I'm going to want to take that ore and either use it for a sole purpose that produces the most net benefit I could generate, or spread it among different applications to generate kind of an average net benefit across the multiple uses. You see that? Consumers are going to consume the thing that my ore produces. When they consume that thing, some sort of benefit is produced. A benefit cannot show up unless a human being consumes my action. By consume, I mean like interacts with the product or service that I produce. The activity is observed either by members of the payer organization, or it's reported by the producers or the consumers to the payer organization, so that that information can be fed into the algorithm, which kicks out the net benefit reward. And then, of course, I, as a producer, because I've taken that ore and applied it in some manner, receive my reward commensurate with the calculation done in the net benefit algorithm. And of course, the rewards open up access to the luxuries. So who knows what, does anyone know what that is? Right, it's the Medal of Honor. And what is the Medal of Honor? It's a reward, but what is it?
Military award.
For what? What do people have to, yes. People have to act in extremely hazardous combat environments without regard for the life in order to earn this reward. Very few human beings have won this award for obvious reasons. when a Marine is in a combat zone and his team is being pinned down by the enemy, do you think the Marine at that moment thinks, I want to win the Medal of Honor, so I'm going to charge that bunker, destroy it, and save all my platoon. Here I go. Do you think he thinks that way? No. What does he do? Yeah, he's like, shit, I'm being pinned, we're pinned down. If someone doesn't do anything, we're gonna get blown away. Someone's got to do something. And he gets up and does his thing. And he doesn't even know that he's doing it. If you ask Medal of Honor winners, they'll be like, I was just doing my job. In the moment, they're like, I'm just trying to say, I gotta save my, they're just doing what they're trained to do in a context that earns them a reward. They're just doing what they're trained to do. They're not thinking about the reward. They're just doing what they need to do. After the fact, do you think that Marine goes to the platoon leader and says, Lieutenant, look, that was a pretty brave thing I did. I would like to receive the Medal of Honor. Do you think he does that? Sometimes. Actually, what happens is someone who observed that act reports it to the chain of command. The chain of command then investigates. They interview people who were there to uncover the facts and to separate the facts from the non-facts. And then that information is passed up the chain through successive levels of approval until finally the president signs off on it and the individual who's in the inquiry receives the award. Oftentimes it happens long after the act is committed. Long after. Sometimes it's obviously because it's at no regard for your life. So sometimes it happens after the dude's gone because he's been killed. Yeah, exactly, right. Right, it's posthumous. The net benefit algorithm works the same way. So you wait until all the facts are uncovered before you dole out the reward. And this is important. This is very important because today you can take an act, be rewarded, or in other words, be compensated for that act in large measure with no regard for the results. Do you agree? Yeah. So what we've done in this innovation is we've said, look, you're going to get paid. You're actually going to get rewarded, just like this medal. You're going to get the reward, but first you have to take the act. And then we have to look at the act to make sure that the act did what we want it to do. If it did what we wanted to do, you're going to get the reward. If it didn't, you're not going to get the reward. But you're not worse off. So like today, if you're working at your job and you're expecting your pay and you don't get that pay, you're worse off, right? Because every month you have to meet some obligations. In this innovation, if you don't get the reward, you're not worse off because you don't have any obligations. There's no debt, there's no mortgage. You get what I'm saying? All your necessities are provided at no cost to you. So there's no threat. There's no scarcity of resources in terms of reward. The only thing you have to do to earn the reward is take some act that makes another human being or the planet better off. Much less risky than the Medal of Honor. So some people say, Perry, this thing is not going to work. How on earth are you going to make this thing happen? And I say to those people, there are lots of examples throughout history where we've done something that was at first impossible and made it possible. Our system today is based on what I just said. So long ago, this guy named Adam Smith, he made up a theory. Capitalism is not a science. Capitalism is an art. It was created out of nothing. There was no basis for the creation of capitalism other than to say, hey, maybe if we do this, it might work. And over the many years that it has been around, it's become the dominant system, not because it's true, but because people have believed in it. There are a lot of other systems, there are a lot of other things that have been created out of nothing against extreme odds. people saying it's impossible, and have made it happen anyway. So, not only do we have that in our favor, not only do we have history in our favor, but we also have this. And this is really cool. And it's hard to describe, so I'm not going to try to. But I'm going to give you a quick overview. So this is called the Viable Systems Model. And this guy, his name is Stafford Beer. Does anyone know who Stafford Beer is? I mean, not personally, but have you heard of his name, Stafford Beer? Okay, so Stafford Beer observed nature, and he realized that all viable systems, so all living things, have 5 subcomponents that make them viable. And then he said, how can we map this so that we can apply that system to our human systems, organizations, such that, like living organisms, they thrive. And then he came up with this map. So my team and I looked into this, and it's freaking brilliant. So we are, what we're doing as we're designing our innovation, we're designing it based on this model, the viable systems model. We don't have time to go into it, like I said, but if you look into it, you'll see that it's a very rigorous and very stable process for designing systems that work in reality. So we could go through some thought experiments, take any one of these 9 areas, and I can walk you through how the system would work. But I'm going to come back to it in a minute. Let me just keep going, we'll come back to it. I want to acknowledge that there are enormous challenges to making this happen, as you can imagine. The one that we're tackling right now is the net benefit algorithm. We've made significant progress on that. There are a couple of other algorithms that are underneath that one that make the system run that we're also building out. So that one's, we're licking it. The bigger problems are inertia. So being able to convince people that the status quo is not the best system we have. It's the better system that we have. It's not the best. And getting them to move from it to something better. That actual movement is happening, and it's being done by organizations like the Zietgeist Movement, Charles Eisenstein, and some other folks. But we have a long way to go there. Fairness is another issue, not because our innovation isn't fair. I believe it is fair. But people's perception, looking at it from the eyes of capitalism and representative government, see it as not fair. They believe that you need to have a government governing in order to make something fair. And then lastly, it's the power situation. So people with wealth in this system of debt, money, and government, people with wealth also have power. And that power comes from their wealth, and their wealth comes from the system. And so convincing those people that this other system will enable them to maintain their wealth but not their power, which is what will happen. That's a hard road to hoe in terms of converting them to something new. So and these are just a few of the major problems that we have. But the thing is, we don't have to have all of the answers. All we have to do is inspire people to look to us as a potential route to a world of total freedom and abundance. Because somewhere out there are people who have a bright idea that hasn't been tapped yet, that needs some inspiration, something to light that fire. Something like this, for example, or maybe TZM, or maybe Ingenuity. Put those people in the right context, and that idea will come out that will solve every single one of these problems. Our solutions exist in other human beings. So we just got to get the human beings in the right context. So this resource-based economy that the Zietgeist Movement talks about, here's how we're going to get there. The first thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to eliminate money as a way of allocating resources. The next thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to get rid of government. Believe it or not, the government does not serve us. It serves itself. I know that may be hard to believe, but that's the fact of the matter. And then the last thing we need to do is we need to design a system that enables individuals to be rewarded for producing the things that other people need, including a better planet. It's very, very simple. It's just those 3 things. But executing on each one of those is extremely difficult. So, some of your eyes are glazing over. Maybe it's a little warm in here. But I'm still going to offer some things that you can do to support what we're doing. There's a free book on our website that you can download to read more about how the innovation works. At the end of this month, we have a online asynchronous event taking place where people who are interested can basically jump in. It doesn't cost anybody anything, but what we're going to do is we're going to be talking about some of these tough issues and actually coming up with solutions, including helping further refine the net benefit algorithm and the other algorithms that we have, should we have enough people. So you can participate in the e-deliberation event. You can find out more about that online. I actually brought some slips of paper with the URL to the e-deliberation event if you want to find out directly what it's about, when it happens, and what's involved. We're going to be holding weekly or monthly working sessions. No, that's not right. It's weekly working sessions. Weekly working sessions online for people who want to totally dive in. Every week we meet on either Google Hangout or Skype, and we basically do the work. So we're coming up with the further refinements for the algorithm. We're looking at the viable system model and making sure that our system is being informed by that, and we're answering other tough questions there. We have online discussion events every month that you can participate in and find out more. Ask your really hard questions. We've got plenty of answers for those. You can organize a real-world event, a meetup, or some sort of like a living room event where I'm happy to come and answer any questions or make this presentation. Tell your friends in TZM, because I believe, so here's the thing. The people who are going to solve our problems are people like you right now. The people who attend events like this. The Zietgeist Movement and my organization are not two separate organizations. We're one movement trying to do the exact same thing. Ingenuity is part of that family. Now that you're here, maybe you didn't know you didn't know what the Zietgeist Movement was when you got here. Now you know, so you're part of the family. We are all working on the same thing. So spreading the word about the Zietgeist Movement, spreading the word about Copiosis is helping get us to the society that we want. So tell your friends. Spread the word through social media. You can subscribe to our blog or follow us on Twitter or Facebook. And of course, visit our website because it's really cool and there's a lot of information there. Okay.